Hello everyone, welcome back. You're watching Empyrion Galactic Survival episode 169. I'm Enigmaeus and today we're continuing with the MineOrb Mark II. This is our hover miner that we've been building for a couple of episodes now. It's definitely an upgrade on the original MineOrb, which was a fun little ship that we put together that used drills instead of drill turrets. But functionally, it wasn't really the kind of thing that I would use. I would much rather personally place an auto miner and deal with the mining that way for two reasons. One, it means that the resources are infinite based on the way that the game currently plays. And two, there's that element of freeing up time to do other things. In this case, however, I just like the idea of having a hover miner on hand that I wouldn't mind using. So whether or not we spend a lot of time behind a drill turret or we just leave it parked on the tarmac of our base, so to speak, that's not really too much of an issue for me as long as it's a good solid functional ship. So that's basically the motivation behind this build. What you see now is, aside from the fact that sometimes it looks kind of neat to just have glass bubbles sticking out of ships, this is a functional element that was originally part of the design because the thought occurred to me that if you've got all these turrets that you're accessing from inside the ship, it might be handy to have a spot also inside the ship where you can look out and kind of survey what you've accomplished up to a certain point, so that if you go as far as you can with one turret, you can assess the situation without leaving the ship and then decide which turret would be the next one, the next best candidate to continue in order to deplete the resource deposit, whatever it happens to be. So there's a specific functional reason for why we have this window in the bottom of the ship, and now you can see, having more or less completed the window, we cut the opening so that you can actually use it, you can actually see out of it. One of the things that I noticed working with the glass and then switching over to working with the regular routine solid blocks that we've been using for so long and the various different shapes that they're available in, is that it's much easier for me to create certain shapes with the solid blocks than it is to make them with the glass. And we were talking about that in the last episode, just a limited selection of glass blocks that we have to use and how difficult it can be to make them all fit together in a way that makes sense. You can see here what was supposed to be a circle is more like a bloated square. It's like a square made out of a flexible material that you started inflating more than it was intended to hold, and it's got those softened edges on all four edges, I guess you could say. That's what it reminds me of, and that's not at all what I was hoping to get out of this whole thing. I was hoping for something that more closely resembles a circle, and you can see for the time that we spent building that glass feature, realizing that it wasn't the right shape, and then coming around and basically redoing the shape with the hardened blocks and using that as a point of reference to correct the circle. Very different in terms of the amount of time that it took to get everything all lined up and set up the way that we wanted it to. And it's just down to familiarity. If I had spent more time in the past working with glass, it's a much more likely outcome that I would have come up with something that I was happy with the first time out, or would have required only minor revisions. In this case, I basically had to redo the entire profile, which fortunately it's not a big feature, so it was fairly quick and easy. One of the things that I found, especially working with the 1x2 wedge blocks, they're 22.5 degrees in one direction and 45 degrees in the other, is that sometimes it's very hard to orient them the way that you want to, because something that looks like it's properly oriented is actually reversed, and you're looking at it as though you're basically looking through the glass and seeing things backwards. I don't know if that makes sense. It makes sense to me describing it because I understand what I'm trying to describe, but it's basically the transparency itself makes it a little bit difficult sometimes to get a good look at exactly how the blocks are oriented. So quite often what you'll see is I actually move them off to the side to a more solid background so that I can figure out exactly what I'm trying to well, I know what I'm trying to accomplish, and I'm trying to make sure that I'm getting what I want with the way that I'm flipping the blocks around. So we finished redoing that whole the outer edges, and then we're going around and changing the polarity so everything is the way it should. It should be more clear looking out of the ship than it is standing on the outside of the ship looking in. And it's done, in case you weren't aware, just by using the rotate tool and the multi-tool. And if you've got it set on the rotate tool and you shoot glass, it just flips the polarity and you can toggle it back and forth. As far as I know, it doesn't even require energy. It doesn't require fuel for the multi-tool to do that. So that's an added bonus. Very soon, we'll be done with this. Just doing a little bit of last-minute tweaking and making sure everything lines up, and then finish off the edges. There were a couple of blocks that I just kind of left, didn't remove enough of them, so when the mirroring was working, it wasn't actually replacing all of the blocks we wanted. But now that's basically done, and this is an opportunity here to go around and build an enclosure around each of the drill turrets, so that if you have an area of the ship that's pressurized and another area of the ship that's not pressurized, the whole thing doesn't implode, so to speak. A viewer pointed out in the last episode that we could have used the shutters, the shutter blocks, usually 45-degree slope. I think you can have them at a straight up and down kind of thing as well. The benefit to those being that apparently they provide an airtight seal, even though they act like an open block in terms of being able to interact with things on the other side of them when your crosshair is pointing at one of the areas where they're open. So I probably, thinking about it, will probably go around and rework the turret bays now so that we will have that in place. And the turret bays themselves will be sealed, even though we'll still be able to access the turrets outside. The added benefit being that we can pressurize the bays and we can pressurize the rest of the interior of the ship, and if one gets that hole in the hull, the others will still be okay. So it's just an added little safety feature that we can throw in without impairing our ability to use the turret bays for their intended purpose. So that's kind of cool. I love getting information like that, because in a million years I never would have even thought to use the shutter blocks. I've used them in the past for cosmetic reasons, but I've never actually used them as part of a working hull before. At least I don't remember having done so. So it's definitely good to have other people kind of keeping an eye on things. We've got everything closed in around the turret bays. So now I just wanted to kind of clean up the interior a little bit. You can see we've got all of this rough, blocky stuff going on as a result of designing the outside. Now it's a good opportunity to go around and start smoothing things off on the inside. The outside is basically done. There's some minor modifications that I have in mind that I haven't even decided for sure that I want to go with them. But I'm not too concerned anymore about changes that I make to the outside having an impact on what's going on the inside. So that's why I usually leave the majority of the interior work until after the outside is absolutely complete. It just gives me more freedom to work on the outside without having to worry about making a mess of things that I've already done inside as well. In this case, I'm using the sort of layered approach to cleaning up all of these weird sort of corners and how they all came together. It makes it a lot easier when you're just kind of focused on one layer and how to smooth it all off and rework it so that it's a more refined kind of element to the structure. And then once that's done, then you just move on to the next layer. And it's not really, at this stage, I'm not really thinking about what I just did, and I'm not really thinking about what I'm going to do with the next layer. I'm just thinking about the one layer that I'm working on and how to make that come together in a way that I'll be happy with. Once it's all done, then I can take a look back at how each of the layers sort of interacts with one another. A given layer might be fine on its own, but compared to the layer above it and or the layer below it, it just doesn't work, just because of the way the different profiles sort of come together. And that's when we rework things, just to kind of make sure that everything is playing nicely with one another before we move on. In this case, again, it's a small ship. It doesn't take long to really do anything, and if we do decide that we want to make changes, it doesn't take long to do those either. So it's just a matter of getting it all done, getting all the layers in, deciding how far down I want to go in this case, because I was starting to lose my mind a little bit after doing all of that glass work and then doing all of the reworking. There's only so many circles that I can do in a given day or a given period of time before I start to lose track of what I'm doing. It's the strangest sensation when you realize that you've just been sitting there spinning a block and you don't even remember what you were trying to do with it anymore. That's when it's time to take a break, and that's getting to that point now where I'm kind of feeling like we're at a good place to stop right along the tops of the enclosures for the drill bays. We can always finish off the rest a little bit later, and then we'll do the final pass to make sure that all the stuff in the interior that we just did, like I say, is working the way that it's supposed to. I decided before I stopped for the day to clean up this area up top as well, just to kind of smooth it from the interior perspective without really changing it on the outside. Didn't take long. Much happier with it for having done it that way. So the next episode, we're going to be looking at the interior again, only it'll probably be everything that we need to get from where we are now to a state of interior completion with all of the equipment that we need, everything that we want. And then all we really have to do is the texturing and the painting, and this guy will be done and ready for a blueprint. So the small ships are getting faster and faster to produce, I find, without compromising the design elements, which is always kind of fun. I'm not 100% sure what we'll be doing for our next build. I know I want to finish off those prototype hull core sort of things that we're looking at, the small vessel starter chassis for people. They can kind of use it to give themselves a head start and as a platform to build the rest of their ship with most of the things that they need already taken care of. That's definitely something that we'll be working on, but as far as big complete projects, I've still got a number of ideas in mind, but nothing concrete. So if you want to be notified about the next and future episodes, we'll finish this one, give you a blueprint, finish everything else off, and start something new. The easiest way to do that is to subscribe to my channel or follow me on social media. Links for social media are always in the information section below the video. Feel free to leave your comments and feedback. Thanks for watching, guys, and take care.